Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind, turning big ideas into real world impact. Let's get started.
Thank you for the introduction, Renos. Tariffs have fallen dramatically over the past few decades, but today, nearly 90% of global trade is shaped not by tariffs, but by technical rules. In the last episode, we explored why standard systems often break down, trapping countries in cycles of low quality and high costs. But what does that actually look like on the ground? For a firm trying to export, it can mean paying for the same certification over and over again. For a hospital, it can mean the difference between a safe surgery and a preventable complication. This is the second episode of the World Development Report 2025 Standards for Development miniseries. Today, we focus on chapters 4 and 5.
It is wonderful to be here. Standards act as invisible engines of economic growth and human development. But when standards are poorly designed, or when they do not match a country's actual capacity, they exclude developing nations from trade and deny vulnerable populations basic services.
That connects the dots for me. It is a double-edged sword. Today, we are exploring two vital arenas for policymakers. First, we look at how to navigate the complex, tangled web of global trade standards from Chapter 4. Then, we connect that to Chapter 5. We examine why taking a phased, process-oriented approach to standards in health and education is critical for building human capital.
Let us start with trade. The way the world regulates trade has completely transformed. Most people assume tariffs are the biggest barrier to doing business across borders. But the data shows something else. Between 1996 and 2021, average most favored nation tariff rates actually fell by 44%.
Exactly. But at the exact same time, technical non-tariff measures, or NTMs, surged. The share of global trade regulated by these technical rules rose from under 15% in the late 1990s to nearly 90% by the 2000s and 20s. Today, exporters of agricultural and food products face an average of more than 15 distinct technical regulations just to enter foreign markets.
And here is the tricky part policymakers face. Unlike in the last episode, where the system is missing, the challenge here is different. Even when systems exist, they are often fragmented and duplicative. Complying with all these fragmented regulations is a massive financial hurdle. The cost of certification and compliance with foreign technical regulations can amount to $425,000 per firm in developing countries. That burden is incredibly heavy for local businesses.
It really is. And exporters are weighed down by overlapping private standards. Take coffee producers, for example. They face 4 major certifications. The criteria for those certifications overlap anywhere from 42% to 71%. Yet, those producers often must pay for completely separate audits for every single one.
That sounds exhausting for any business.
Yes, but here is where this gets interesting. The report outlines specific policy actions to fix this, starting with building domestic quality infrastructure. Certification is just too expensive when domestic capacity is low.
That is a crucial insight. Look at the contrast in auditing capacity. Ethiopia has fewer than 100 auditors for ISO standards. Meanwhile, Germany has 12,000. Expanding local testing and auditing means local firms do not have to send product samples abroad. That simple change significantly reduces costs.
Having the infrastructure nearby changes everything. The next solution is harnessing foreign direct investment, or FDI. FDI can transfer technology and quality practices directly, as long as local capacity keeps pace.
Tunisia is a perfect example of this. Their automotive components sector employs over 90,000 people. That sector has grown by 10% annually since 2010. Foreign firms introduced global standards like ISO 9001 and specific environmental metrics right into local supply chains. The result was massive local growth.
And to tie it together, policymakers are advised to pursue strategic alignment. They need to align domestic rules with international standards and create mutual recognition agreements. That spares local firms from duplicate testing and opens up regional markets.
That covers the economic side from Chapter 4. Now, Chapter 5 brings us to human capital. Setting adaptive and process-oriented standards is just as important for health and education.
The report mentions the principle of phased capacity. Setting standards that are too high for a country's resource level can actually restrict access. The data suggests countries achieve the best outcomes by matching standards to their current capacity to enforce them. They expand coverage first, and then they raise the bar later.
And this is the part I love. We see this perfectly in China's health sector. Starting in 1965, China faced a severe shortage of medical professionals for 80% of its rural population. Instead of waiting for fully trained doctors, they deployed paramedics known as barefoot doctors. That program grew to approximately 1.6 million people by 1975.
And instead of requiring full medical degrees, they trained them using a practical, results-oriented manual focusing on primary care. This adaptive standard helped increase China's life expectancy to 63 years by 1978. Then, as the country's capacity grew, the standard was officially raised in 1984. Paramedics then had to pass formal tests to become certified village doctors.
It is a brilliant example of scaling up over time. But there is another major lesson here about the types of standards we use. Input standards must be paired with process standards. Let me explain the pitfall of input-only reforms.
Please do.
In 2016, Pakistan reformed its public sector teacher recruitment. They required a passing score on a standardized test. The new hires were significantly more likely to hold postgraduate degrees. The degree is an input standard. However, student literacy and numeracy outcomes actually declined. The reform failed to improve how teachers actually taught in the classroom.
That makes perfect sense. You can have the best credentials, but the actual teaching process matters more. In contrast, the report highlights the success of adaptive curriculums. In education, curriculums often move faster than actual student learning.
Exactly. India's Teaching at the Right Level, or TARL program, is a fantastic model. It focuses on teaching children at their current competency level, rather than forcing them into an overly ambitious, uniform grade-level standard. In the state of Uttar Pradesh, TARL learning camps doubled the number of children who could read a paragraph or story.
That is a massive improvement just by adapting the process to the child. The report also points out the transformative power of benchmarks and checklists. This feels highly actionable.
Extremely actionable. In Brazil, the state of Ceará aligned its curriculum, teacher expectations, and municipal funding around one clear benchmark. The rule was simple. Every child must be literate by the end of grade 2. By systematically monitoring this single standard, the state raised its National Education Quality Index, or IDEB score, from 3.2 in 2005 to 7.7 in 2023.
More than doubling the score over that period. And we see similar success with health process checklists. Standardized protocols are highly effective, low-cost interventions. An 8-hospital global test of the WHO Safe Surgery Checklist reduced surgical complications by 36% and deaths by 47%.
Just from using a checklist. Similarly, when Kenya introduced the standardized Joint Health Inspection Checklist, inspected health facilities increased their safety compliance scores to 41%. That compares to 35% for the control facilities. In practice, this looks like a local clinic simply following a daily printed list to ensure equipment is sanitary. It is straightforward, and it saves lives immediately.
We have covered essential ground today. To successfully leverage standards, policymakers really must balance global integration with local realities. In the economic realm, this means harmonizing trade regulations and investing in domestic auditing capacity. That prevents standards from becoming trade barriers.
We are ultimately talking about shaping the rules, so they lift people up instead of holding them back. Whether it is ensuring a local business can afford to certify its products for a global market, or making sure a rural clinic has a practical checklist to save lives, standards are the foundation. Developing nations must actively participate in international standard-setting bodies to ensure these rules reflect their priorities. When countries build capacity step by step and focus on processes that work on the ground, they unlock immense potential for trade and human well-being. Over to you, Rinos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.